Here's 3 more pieces of history we need to stop teaching like they're gospel truth. Because the way you probably learned them in school, yeah, that's not how it went down. Number 1. The Cherokee Nation was doomed because it was primitive. Now, the way this story is usually told is the Cherokee were just another vanishing tribe, too simple, too far behind, and inevitably swept aside by progress. Except, nope. By the early 1800s, the Cherokee Nation was one of the most politically and culturally advanced governments in the Americas. They had their own constitution modeled on the United States, with a legislature, judiciary, and executive branch. Their capital had streets, shops, and even printing presses. They adopted a written language, Sequoia's syllabary, that led to a near universal literacy rate among Cherokee citizens in just a few years. And in 1828, they launched the Cherokee Phoenix, a bilingual newspaper printed in both Cherokee and English. But none of that mattered when the state of Georgia and President Andrew Jackson decided they wanted the land instead. The U.S. ignored its own Supreme Court, in the case Worcester v. Georgia, and sent in troops to drive the Cherokee out on the Trail of Tears. Thousands died, not because they were behind, but because they were in the way. Ignoring court orders and forcibly removing innocent people. Now that does sound familiar. Anyway, this wasn't the death of a primitive people. It was the destruction of a sovereign, literate, and self-governing nation by a government that wanted their territory more than it wanted to honor its own laws. Number 2. The Indian Citizenship Act gave Native Americans full rights in 1924. So, here's the feel-good version. In 1924, Congress finally recognized Native Americans as citizens, and everything was fine after that. And you guessed it, nope, again. Yes, the Indian Citizenship Act made Native Americans U.S. citizens, but citizenship didn't guarantee the right to vote. States used every trick they could to keep Native people out of the ballot box. In Arizona and New Mexico, courts ruled that Native Americans living on reservations weren't considered residents for voting purposes. Utah blocked Native voting until 1957. In some states, literacy tests were applied selectively, and even after formal legal barriers came down, voter suppression continued through polling location closures, ID laws that excluded tribal IDs, and gerrymandering that diluted Native voting power. Selective gerrymandering and voter suppression through nonsensical ID laws. And here I was thinking times have changed. Also, it's no coincidence that the 1924 Act came on the heels of World War I, when Native Americans were being drafted into military service despite not having full citizenship rights. Once the war was over, the government granted citizenship, but without the most important function of citizenship in a democracy, the ability to participate in it. Number 3. The Alamo was a noble stand for freedom. If you grew up in the US, especially in Texas, you've probably heard the Alamo described as a heroic last stand for liberty and independence, brave frontiersmen against an evil Mexican army. Except, the liberty they were fighting for was the liberty to own people. By the 1820s, Mexico had banned slavery. Many American settlers in Texas, then a Mexican province, had brought enslaved people with them in open defiance of Mexican law. When Mexico started enforcing the ban more strictly, tensions rose. The Texas Revolution wasn't just about independence, it was about resisting laws that outlawed slavery. The men at the Alamo weren't just defending a fort, they were defending the way of life built on human bondage. Now that doesn't erase the courage it might take to stand in a losing fight, but it changes the story we tell about what they were fighting for. After the battle, the "Remember the Alamo" myth became a rallying cry, stripped of the context that slavery was at the heart of the conflict. Instead of remembering the messy, ugly truth, schools turned it into a legend of self-sacrifice for freedom, without mentioning who that freedom excluded. These myths didn't survive by accident. They survived because they're comforting. They turn complex, ugly truths into simple, feel-good stories. But history isn't here to comfort us. It's here to remind us what happens when we forget the truth. And we're forgetting a lot.